November of 1970, I joined the Navy in part because I didn't have the grades to get into college. I hated working in a factory. My parents were tired of smelling my BO. But this didn't make any sense to me. All through high school, I'd been writing these anti-war love poems to impress the girls, and now not only was I in the Navy, I had volunteered for the SEALs, knowing that I could go to Vietnam. Well, the higher-ups must have took one look at this scrawny little guy and laughed their asses off, because they didn't even bother telling me I was rejected. So instead of going to Nam as a SEAL, they sent me to Greece to be a radio man at a base about 45 miles from Athens on the coast. Greece, beautiful tourist mecca of the world. I should have been grateful, right? A few months after I'm there, I get shot at while pulling guard duty, but it was no biggie. You know, the guy was about a half a football field away and he was shooting buckshot. What really freaked me out was the day that I was walking to Niamakri, this small fishing village near the base, and this car tries to run me over. And I mean, I wasn't paying attention and I had to jump into the grass to avoid getting killed. And then they swung around to give it another half-assed chance. And it was then that I realized this car was full of young men, roughly my age. And I said, what the hell is going on here? So I started asking questions, and I found out that Greece had had a military coup a few years back. And by the time I got there, 8,000 people had been imprisoned. Now I understood why the Greek army was always driving through the countryside. They were trying to remind the peasants who was in charge. And it also made sense why the only young people that would talk to us were cabbies and prostitutes. We were there to prop up the colonels. The same thugs who were torturing people in clandestine jails. And then I flashed on that day when I almost got killed by those guys, and I realized why they did that. They hated me. I was the enemy. And that hit me in the stomach like a sucker punch. And I couldn't catch my breath for a while. And so I asked for a meeting with the base chaplain and with this officer, and I said, hey, look, I can't hang with this evil shit. You need to let me out of here. And so they said, you know, you can't quit the Navy, you little turd. Grow up, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Okay, so this is gonna be a little harder than I thought. So I stopped wearing the uniform. I stopped saluting officers. I won't even cash my chit, and I even did a sit-in at the quarterdeck, for which I was put in custody and given a captain's mast, and at which I told them that until we pulled out of Vietnam and stopped turning water cannons on black people, oh, awesome, thank you. Until we stopped turning water cannons on black people back home, I was not going to do jack shit for the Navy. So, you know, one thing I gotta say here is I was full of shit. I didn't have the political maturity or stamina to see this position through, so after 30 days in the brig, I came out with my tail between my legs and complied. And I was lost for a while, feeling sorry for myself, until this cat blew in after getting himself kicked off of some boat for insubordination. And I always remember him coming up to a group of people and he said, I'm Jeffrey Koukas. I'm a Jew from New York City. And the way he said it was like he was daring someone to call him a kike so he could kick the shit out of their anti-Semite ass. Thank you. Now, I was 18 years old and I didn't really know what a Jew was back then, but I did know that this guy was a badass and I really liked him, and he instantly took me out of feeling sorry for myself. And that wasn't the last time he would save me. So we started hanging out and plotting our escape. And we came up with a brilliant idea that we were going to score some heroin. We would shoot it, snort it, whatever we had to do, and then we would orchestrate ourselves getting busted. And of course the Navy, once they realized we were a couple of junkies, they'd have to get rid of us, right? So the best place in Greece to score drugs was the Acropolis. That's where hippies from all over the world would be there with their backpacks full of hashish and other good dope that they'd smuggled in from Turkey and Afghanistan, Morocco, wherever. So we smoked a lot of good dope, but we never found any heroin. However, we did meet this guy from London, Ali. He made his own acid. And somehow we convinced this guy to come back to Nehemiah with us. And so I remember the first time he put a drop of that stuff on my tongue. I was running up and down the beach chasing shiny fish in the shallows, and I swear I found the axis of the world sticking out of the sand. So it wasn't long afterwards that half the base was getting fucked up on Ali's recipe. And so between the acid and the good hashish, there wasn't too many days that went by that I wasn't stoned. And so several months like this go on, and then Jeffrey's just gotten back from a funeral, and somehow they get wind that they should check his duffel bag, and roll up in a pair of socks they find 30 hits of synthetic THC. And you know, since I was his roommate, they questioned me, and instead of claiming my innocence, we saw our golden opportunity and both copped to being dope fiends. So later on, we're in sick bay, we're waiting for blood tests and paperwork, and we're talking about how we're going to buy a Volkswagen van and drive across the United States all the way to California. When in came that chaplain, looking really sour. He said, you know, you guys are going to get the same deviant classification on your discharge as a homosexual, don't you? And Jeffrey said, you think we give a shit, Padre? And we both started laughing really, really hard. But not so fast, you know. They thought, well, we only had 20 hits, 30 hits of THC. Maybe these guys could be rehabilitated. So they were going to send us to a hospital in Naples. So one thing I want to stop and say about Jeffrey, he was this macho, pain in the ass guy, but he had real heart. He saved me and paid the consequences. So I'm having a gin and tonic in the enlisted men's club. Trying to lay low when 3 or 4 lifers stared in on me with the usual loser, burnout, faggot, to which I reply something about them being hopeless alcoholics, and I probably said that I just fucked one of their wives. Well, the first thing I know, I'm on the floor getting my ass kicked. And in flies Jeffrey like Bruce Lee, and he was kicking and punching, he even broke a bottle against the bar and waved it in their direction, kind of half-assed way, and they backed off and they threw the bottle on the floor, and thank God he did it just that, because if he would have went much further, I think he would have ended up in Leavenworth. But he didn't go to Italy with me. They sent him back to the United States and gave him a dishonorable discharge. So in Italy, instead of being rehabilitated, I took a liking to amphetamines and found out what a real dope fiend is. In part, I was doing this to prove to the shrinks that I was a loser, a lost cause, etc., etc. And after a while, I succeeded. The thing is that when your whole psyche is wrapped up in proving to people that you are a burnout, and a loser, some part of you begins to believe it. So they sent me back to the States, and I'm standing in line at the Brooklyn Naval Yard, waiting to get my exit physical, and having just been told miraculously I'm going to get an honorable discharge, I look at myself in the mirror and I said, you know, when I came into the Navy, I was a twig. Now I was a human toothpick. My hair was falling out. My face was an oil slick of acne, and I could barely talk without slurring my words. And I kind of vowed at that moment that enough of this shit, I'm done. And so they gave me a week in Liberty, and I beelined it to Jeffrey's place in the Lower East Side. And the first thing I saw and smelled when I came out of the subway was trash. I mean, the New York garbage workers were on strike, and it was quite a mess. And so I had to make my way over to Henry Street, and I got to his 7-story walk-up and perched myself up on the stoop and started fantasizing about pulling up in front of Venice Beach and all that kind of stuff. And a couple hours later, he comes walking up the stairs. The last time I saw him, he was like, you know, this muscular, tall guy. Now he looked like he'd been on a hunger strike. He was bent over. His eyes were glassy as water, and I wanted to puke. He let me stay with him and his grandmother. He introduced me to his friends, none of whom liked me. They thought I was a narc because I didn't want to smoke their dope. And they couldn't for the life of them understand why anyone would want to drive across America. Didn't I know that America sucked? There's nothing but rednecks out there. Hadn't I seen Easy Rider? And besides that, Jeffrey's new old lady wasn't going to like it too much when she finds out he's leaving town. So what turned out to be my last day in Manhattan, I'm sitting around a bird picnic table with Jeffrey's friends. They're all talking about all the girls they balled and all the girls they wanted to have sex with. And one of them leans over to me and he goes, "Hey, I heard you want to get you a taste. You know, pop the virgin." I said, "No, man. I never wanted to do smack, even when I was looking for it. So fuck that shit and fuck you." And I turned to Jeffrey and I could tell he was not going to be able to save me this time. And I could also see that he wasn't coming with me. He was going to stay in this small cement park with telephone for trees, pretending to play chess by streetlight and shooting junk with the same high school friends he joined the Navy to escape. And it was then that I realized all these drugs that I did was the vehicle to get me to where I wanted to go. And for Jeffrey, it had been the destination. So before they could see me start crying, I picked my ass up off the bench and walked away, and I could hear them laughing until the city swallowed me up and I was down in the subway, racing down the rails to the Brooklyn Naval Yard, desperate to get my speed-ravaged ass out of New York City and back to the factory rats and party stores of downriver Detroit where no one was waiting for me. And I knew that this time I was going to have to save myself. Thank you.